Okay, so the quote is, "They all gotta say what you should or shouldn't do, but they don't have a clue." And so that's what he's effectively saying right there. Is he's saying it's easy for those whose foot is set outside the slough of pain to lessen well with admonitions him who lies therein. Like, it's easy to say from the outside what I should do inside my pain, but you just don't know anything. You just don't know anything about what I'm going through. With perfect knowledge did I all I did. I willed to sin and sinned, I owned it all. I championed men unto my proper pain. And sin here means, it doesn't just mean like to err against a human being. It doesn't mean to just do like something mildly unethical. It doesn't even mean to do something immoral. It means to do something directly in opposition to the will of God. It means to commit black magic. We're talking about magic. And what Aeschylus is trying to do right now is he's trying to tell the audience that you don't need to worry about being punished by Zeus. That's a silly thing to worry about. You got to remember, this is at a religious festival. This is at a day where we're keeping in mind Zeus and the gods and the will of the gods and the will of these beings and the ineffable nature of their natures, right? The ineffability of their natures, right? And so we're trying to F the effable for just a day or just a weekend or whatever. They didn't have a 7-day week like we do, so they didn't have weekends. That's a very modern thing. But criticizing Zeus could get you labeled pharmacon, is what I'm trying to say. And so when he says, I sinned and I knew I was sinning and I sinned well, what he's saying is that I broke the will of Zeus, but I did it for good reasons. I did it for the best. And so to well do something means best. To best do it. Not to do it, like we say well is in a sliding scale of goodness with great and awesome and these things. And well is like C-. You passed, you did well, kid, but you could do better. And in this language use, and the older use of our language, well was the best you could do. To do good was to do adequate, and to do well was to approach perfection. I willed to sin and sinned. I own it all. I willed to sin. It wasn't just I decided to sin. It wasn't just, well, I acted in such a way that annoyed God. It was that I set my will. I oriented myself toward a goal that I knew was in opposition of Zeus. This is an apology and an accepting of wrongdoing that, frankly, is profound. Imagine if a serial killer had done something like this. Yet scarce I deemed that in such cruel doom, withering upon this skyish precipice, I should inherit lonely mountain crags, here in a vast 10-neighbored solitude. And I'm going to read that again because I don't know that I understood that. Withering upon this skyey precipice, and so he's saying skyey because it's under the ground, but he can't see the firmament. He can't see the dome of the earth above him. I should inherit lonely mountain crags, meaning that he should be able to wander the vastness of the underworld because he's alone here in vast 10-neighbored solitude. 10-neighbored being one of those adjectives that you were encouraged as a poet in this tradition to invent. Right, that shows how clever you are with the language. Oh, 10-neighbored, because 10 lives deep in the earth. It's pretty clever. Yet, list not to lament my present pains, but stepping from your cars unto the ground, listen, while I tell the future fates, now drawing near until ye know the whole. Grant ye, oh grant my power, be pitiful to one now racked with woe. The doom of pain wanders, but settles soon or late on all. And the chorus responds, to willing hearts and schooled to feel, Prometheus came thy tongue's appeal. Therefore we leave with lightsome tread the flying cars in which we sped. We leave the stainless virgin air where winged creatures float and fare, and by thy side on rocky land thus gently we alight and stand, willing from end to end to know thine history of woe. that rhymed very nicely in English. I don't think I have to explain it. But I do believe that those cars are being carried by human beings whose faces are probably obscured, or probably they're like in blankets or something similar, right? Like they're inside a sheet that's hanging down around them, that sort of thing, and then the wings are like coming off it so that as they move, the wings move, that sort of thing. Entirely possible they did something ingenious like that. If I can imagine it, so could have they. And so the chorus alight from their winged cars, Antiochianus, mounted on a griffin. And now that may have been like a wooden, like a wooden rocking horse on wheels, right? So that's entirely possible that somebody pushed that out for her. I want to give her a, she's a woman, but I want to give her like a regal voice. Thus, over leagues and leagues of space I come, Prometheus, to thy place. By will alone, not rein, I guide the winged thing on which I ride, and much be sure I mourn thy case. Kinship is pity's bond, I trow, and wert thou not akin, I vow, none other should have more than thou of my compassion's grace. 'Tis said and shall be proved, no skill have I to gloze and feign goodwill. Name but some mode of helpfulness, and thou wilt in a trace confess that I, Oceanus, am best of all thy friends and trustiest. Ho! What a sight of marvel, says Prometheus. What, thou too comest to contemplate my pains and darest? Yet how, I wot not, leaving far behind the circling tide thy name-fellow and those rock-arched, self-hallowed caverns, thus to come unto this land whose womb bears iron ore. And so we got to understand, Oceanus is the Atlantic Ocean that's talking to him right now. Art come to see my lot, resent with me the ills I bear. Well, gaze thy full, behold me, friend of Zeus, part author of his power. Mark in what ruthlessness he bows me down. Yea, I behold, Prometheus, says Oceanus. Their voices might be very similar. And would warn thee, spite of all thy wisdom, for thy weal. Learn now thyself to know and to renown a rightful spirit within thee, for made new with pride of place sits Zeus among the gods. Now, if thou choosest to fling forth on him words rough with anger thus and edged with scorn, Zeus, though he sit aloof afar on high, may hear thine utterance and make thee deem his present wrath a mere pretense of pain. Punish, poor wretch, the passion of thy soul, and seek instead acquittance from thy pangs. Unlike my words seem belike my words seem ancientry to thee, such nameless. That cannot be what that word is. There's something on my screen. Aha! Such natheless, O Prometheus, is the meed that doth await the overweening tongue. Meek wert thou never, wilt not crouch to pain, but set amid misfortunes cravest more. I want to say real quick, that mead there, when she says, "Oh, Prometheus is the mead," M-E-E-D, that's not M-E-A-D, that's not the drink. That's a different way of saying mind or to know. But set amid misfortunes cravest more. Now, if thou let thyself be schooled by me, thou must not kick against the goad. Thou knowest, a despot rules, harsh, resolute, supreme, whose will is law, or whose law is will. Yet shall I go to him, with all endeavor to relieve thy plight, so thou wilt curb the tempest of thy tongue. Surely thou knowest in thy wisdom deep the saw, who vaunts amiss quick pain is his. That's a quote. And what she's saying is that even though she's not exactly Hera, she is one of Zeus's lesser wives, and she is compelled to do what Zeus says, just like all of the other goddesses, even though she's the Atlantic Ocean. Prometheus, O enviable thou, and accursed, thou who wast art and part in all I dared? And now, let be, make this no care of thine, for Zeus is past persuasion, urge him not. Look to thyself, lest thine emprise thou rue. And so what you have to understand is that the author here is using Prometheus to show what impiety and blasphemy are like. A typical blasphemer will be like, well, I'm not a blasphemer, but, right? They won't even know that they're speaking blasphemy. So like when I scroll YouTube shorts and I see people being blasphemous, or like when people were being blasphemous in my live stream while I was reading the book of Job, or people who are going to climb up into the comments of this and be blasphemous, it's a lesser crime. It's a forgivable crime in the eyes of God. In fact, even Jesus says that blasphemy isn't blaspheming against the Holy Spirit, that blaspheming against the Holy Spirit is willing to do sin. It's choosing, it's knowing that what you're doing is breaking the laws of God, is going against the will of God, is doing black magic. The only unforgivable sin is black magic. And this author is making that very clear. Oceanus then says, Thou hast more skill to school thy neighbour's fault than to amend thine own. 'Tis proved in plain. And so what she's saying is like, you can correct other people, but you're definitely not going to correct yourself. Like, you know that what you're doing is wrong. So you could tell other people, don't be like me. And in a lot of ways, what I'm telling people is, don't be like me. Don't be like me. The way being like me arrives you at is this one. You don't want this. You won't survive this. Don't do what I do. 'Tis proved in plain, by fact not hearsay, that I read this well. Yet I am fixed to go. Withhold me not. Assured I am, assured that Zeus will grant the boon I crave, the loosening of thy bonds. In part I praise thee, to end. In part I praise thee, to the end will praise. Goodwill thou lackest not, but yet forbear thy further trouble. If thy heart be vain, or be fain, bethink thee that thy toil avails me not. Nay, rest thee well, aloof from danger's brink. What he's saying is, look, it's just not going to help if you go and ask Zeus to help me, and it might get you destroyed. I will not ease my woe by base relief, and knowing others to involve therein. Away the thought, for deeply do I rue my brother Atlas's doom. Far off he stands in sunset land, and on his shoulder bears the pillared mountain mass, whose base is earth, whose top is heaven and its ponderous load, too great for any grasp. With pity too I saw earth's child, the monstrous thing of war, that in Cilicia's hollow places dwelt, Typho. I saw his 100-headed form crushed and constrained, yet once his stride was fierce, his jaws gaped horror, and their hiss was death, and all heaven's host he challenged to the fray, while, as one vowed to storm the power of Zeus, forth from his eyes he shot a demon glare. And so again, I'm interrupting, because like in the book of Job, when the author of Job goes at length to have God describe his destruction of Leviathan, when God does this, when the book of Job does this, it's because A, the story was old enough that not everybody knew it anymore, and B, it's a good story, but in my opinion, C, because the Greeks were doing it too. I am of the opinion that the author of Job uses the character Elihu to state outright that he, the author of the book of Job, is engaged in Greek literature, and so I think that much of what God says, Job isn't syncretizing with Greek literature. He's using Greek literature to explain that they already have the same stories as the Greeks. They don't need to syncretize. These stories go beyond the divisions of Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. these aren't just good stories. We have this idea that because Greek comedy was irrelevant or irreverent, that Greek drama, and let me actually describe what irreverent means here. Greek comedy, nobody was safe. And typically what happened is the poets, the playwrights, the comics would actually make the stories they were writing about famous people in the audience. So political comedies would be about sitting politicians, and they would absolutely destroy them. Modern politicians, we think satire is hurtful and borderline okay, acceptable today. Read a Greek fucking comedy. Read Greek satire. They weren't just cutting. They were savage, and Aristotle talks about it, and I think it's in Poetics that comedy was actually considered savage in its day. It was actually considered uncivilized, and it was considered a letting go back to a more primitive, a more savage way of behaving, more like our ape ancestors, literally flinging shit at one another, is what Greek comedy was. And so people just assume that because Greek comedy was that way, they just assume that Greek drama was that way. And Greek drama was absolutely not about flinging shit on the gods. So if the gods appeared, if Zeus appears in a comedy and somebody throws shit in his face, it's allowed to happen because of the Pharmakon rules, because of the liminality of play in its own right. They thought that these plays, they're called plays not because you're playing in the sense of making believe and playing pretend in the yard with friends as children. That's not what they're doing. They're playing the roles of the gods for you to see. They're playing it out for you in a cosmic game of as above, so below. Okay? And so the writers and the actors understand very much that what they cannot do in a drama that is meant to accurately represent the will of these gods and the characters and the natures of reality. If you want to talk about, okay, well, they're just anthropomorphizations of reality. Okay, well, the anthropomorphization has to stand firm in the face of the criticism, because these are all judged. They're scored and there's a winner. So they have to be good. They're hugely competitive. They have to be good. Okay? So what you cannot do is blaspheme Zeus. And so what Oceana says is that she's going to approach blasphemy in the name of Prometheus to go and advocate for him. And what Prometheus is saying is, please don't. The world needs the Atlantic Ocean to exist. Please do not get yourself dried up because you anger Zeus. These are the stakes at play in this play. And so what he's saying is that, like, from his hellscape, he doesn't think about his own suffering. He thinks about the suffering of his brothers, Atlas and Typho. That Atlas, as you know, has to carry the world on his shoulders. And Typho was once the most powerful dragon imaginable. And both of them were chained to greater punishments than what Prometheus has by a capricious and frankly evil Zeus. This book is about evil. It's about where evil comes from. And so the book of Enoch comes out on the other side. It comes out on the side that Prometheus is where evil came from. And Prometheus says that because of me, greater evils even than the lack of knowing exactly the moment of your death comes from him. He's saying that I'm a source of a lot of human evil, but I am not evil. I am not the source of all evil. That ultimately Zeus chooses whether you do evil or not if your will is in line with Zeus. And if your will is out of line with Zeus and you do something evil, Zeus will punish you greater than what he's punished Prometheus, because Prometheus's evil was actually well. It wasn't evil. It was a transgression against God, but it wasn't a transgression against good. And so even here, you're starting to see the Christian divergence from Judaism. You're starting to see the Christian divergence from Hellenic paganism, Hellenic henotheism, and you're seeing it early. You're seeing it before Hellenism, in fact. It skilled not the unsleeping bolt of Zeus, the downward levin with its rush of flame smote him, and made dumb forever the clamor of his vaunting. To the heart stricken he lay, and all the mold of strength sank thunder-shattered to a smouldering ash. And helpless now and laid in ruin huge he lieth by the narrowing strait of sea, crushed at the root of Aetna's mountain pile, high on the pinnacles whereof there sits Hephaestus, sweltering at the forge, and thence on some hereafter day shall burst and stream the lava floods that shall with ravening fangs gnaw thy smooth lowlands, fertile Sicily. Such ire shall Typho from his living grave send seething up, such jets of fiery surge, hot and unslaked, although himself be laid in quaking ashes by Zeus's thunderbolt. But thou dost know hereof, nor needest me to school thy sense. Thou knowest safety's road, walk then thereon. I to the dregs will deign, till Zeus relent from wrath my present woe. And now I want to tell you something else from our meta reading that you could know from the reading that I've done here on YouTube for other books along this same vein. Mount Etna is interesting for him to mention as a volcano under which lives Hephaestus, and the mountain that is the opening to the gate of hell circa 500 BCE, because circa 1200 BCE, that mountain remains the entrance to the gate of hell, but it's no longer Hephaestus who lives in it, it's King Arthur. Continuity, folks. Oceanus then says, Nay, but, Prometheus, know'st thou not we saw? Words can appease the angry soul's disease. Another quote. Prometheus responds, Aye, if in season one apply their salve, not scorching wrath's proud flesh with caustic tongue. But in wise thought and venturous essay, perceivest thou a danger? Asks Oceanus. Prithee tell. I see a fool's good nature, useless toil. Let me be sick of that disease. I know, loyalty, masked as folly, wins the way. And so what he's saying is that a fool's good nature is folly's useless toil. And so, like, in some level, that's why I no longer go to Christ's table. A fool's good nature leads them to provide shitty food for unintelligent and unmotivated people, instead of a quality meal for people who are working the way of God. Because see, if the meal were quality, if people walked in there into Christ's table and the meal weren't just warm or it weren't just hot leftovers, if it were a good meal that somebody every single day, not just some Thursdays when the Amish show up, and the Amish being different is my point. They understand that a fool's good nature is useless toil. Useless toil is food that tastes bad and doesn't provide good nutrition because it's all been cooked out or boiled out. These people, they would work harder to deserve that food. What I noticed is that my labors on YouTube and to make The Last Sandcastle and to work on Rob Longshore and to be a mentor and a leader and a friend on Patreon to my supporters, that those things went unrewarded by Christ's table. They go largely unrewarded by Taco Bell. But the other day when I took Magic Shadow's $50 donation and I bought myself a $10 calzone and an $8 salad with it, that was reward. That was a reward. And so, like, making $20 a day so I can just eat quality food would be a reward for what I'm doing here. You understand what I'm saying? And so that doesn't have to be any one person's problem. Mr. S, it doesn't have to be your problem. But it could be 2 million of your problems. You see what I'm saying? I see a fool's good nature, useless toil. And then Oceanus says, Let me be sick of that disease. I know. Loyalty, masked as folly, wins the way. And so being loyal to a worthy but ultimately doomed cause wins the way for that doomed cause, right? So like what did Luke have that Han Solo, the better, the more experienced pilot, the pilot who ultimately did defeat Darth Vader, what did Luke have that nobody else in Rogue Squadron had? Like, you've seen Star Wars, right? If you haven't seen Star Wars, watch Star Wars. It's 2 hours of your life. You've just spent fucking 2 hours of your life with me. You'll be okay. I promise you'll enjoy the experience if you go into it asking the question, what does Luke have that nobody else in this movie has? Because nobody has written a book about this. Nobody's made a YouTube video essay about this. But what does Luke have? I've looked on the internet. Nobody else has had this opinion. This is me giving you something unique that nobody else will give you. What does Luke have that nobody else has? He has loyalty and the cause of the rebellion. Masked as folly. He's going to go do something impossible. He's going to go shoot proton torpedoes into a hole the size of a womp rat. But what does he do? He wins the way. Prometheus responds, "But of thy blunder I shall bear the blame." So if she goes and does this, all Zeus is going to hear is that Prometheus put you up to it. To which Oceanus says, "Clearly thy word would send me home again." She's like, "Well, I've come here to visit you, to plead and tell you that I'm concerned for you, and you're telling me to just leave." And on a lot of levels, that's what if I were to make it available, you would see that that's what I was doing to people who disagreed with me in my live channel. It's like, on my live stream, it's like, I'm not going to argue with you, and I'm not going to prove you wrong, and I'm not going to prove me right. I'm just going to ask you to leave. And so, something that I don't think you understand is that Greek dialogue, especially in these plays, but I mean, Plato, Greek dialogue was complex. It was complex and political. This wasn't whatever you might think it was just because it was in 500 BC, which means that maybe you need to revisit Gilgamesh, which is from something like 4000 BC. Definitely it was written down by 2000 BC. And see how complex the dialogue is there, how intelligent these people are. And these people consuming this stuff that you're like, wow, this is dizzyingly complex dialogue. This was the normal uneducated person. This was the high school graduate of the Greek world. This is what adults engaged in. And so if you can't engage in it, you aren't an adult. You are not an adult by the standards set by the 500th year before Christ. You're 2,500 years a child. You got some growing up to do. And so I'm here to do it with you in a gentle way, because that's not a value judgment. I set myself to that standard. If I can't read their literature and understand it, I'm not an adult in the same way that they are. Prometheus responds to her telling him that the way he's talking, she should just leave, by saying, lest thy lament for me should bring thee hate. Yes, get the hell out of here. Whoops. Okay, it just suddenly moved 5 pages forward from where I was. Sorry about that. Oceanus responds to that with, hate from the newly throned omnipotence. And you got to remember, this is at the beginning of the Greek conception of modern time, then modern time, when Zeus is only recently enthroned. One of the first things he does is hunt down his enemies. So what's the first thing that, I think it's Henry II is the first tutor. It might be Henry VI. What's the first thing that he doesn't do, right? Right. Be heedful, says Prometheus, lest Zeus's will be wroth with thee. Thy doom, Prometheus, cries to me, beware. And so what she's saying, cries to me, beware. And so what she's saying is that I'm looking at you, I see what you're going through, and I know the risks. Mount, make way, discretion at thy side. Thy word is said to me an act to go. For lo, my hippogriff with waving wings fans the smooth course of air, and fain is he to rest his limbs within his ocean stall. I don't know the difference and a hippogriff and a griffin in their terminology, but I think a hippogriff is a griffin with horse parts. I think a hippogriff is a griffin with horse parts, but I could be wrong. And so what she says is to rest his limbs within the ocean stall. And so she's like, I'm out. And then she leaves. And so the chorus picks back up. For the woe and the wreck and the doom, Prometheus, I utter my sighs. O'er my cheek flows the fountain of tears from tender, compassionate eyes. For stern and abhorred is the sway of Zeus on his self-sought throne, and ruthless the spear of his scorn to the gods of the days that are done. And over the limitless earth goes up a disconsolate cry, Ye were all so fair and have fallen so great, and your might has gone by. And so it's important that they keep pointing out that, like, the first god that Cronus dethroned, that first god sort of was before a throne, and then Cronus kind of made the throne, and then Zeus sits on the throne. And so that's not really dissimilar to what Ezekiel shows us in the book of Ezekiel. So wails with a mighty lament the voice of the mortals who dwell in the Eastland, the home of the holy, for thee and the fate that befell, and they of the Colchian land, the maidens whose arm is for war, and the Scythian bowmen, who roam by the lake of Maeotis afar, and the blossom of battling hordes that flowers upon Caucasus height, with clashing of lances that pierce, and with clamor of swords that smite. And so you do recognize that he's describing the Pontic-Caspian lowland, which is where the Indo-European language was born. So he knows what the fuck he's talking about, whether a modern historian or linguist wants him to or not. He knows what he's talking about. He just doesn't know exactly when he's talking about. Strange is thy sorrow, the only one I know who has suffered thy pain, Atlas the Titan, the god in a reckless, invincible chain. And so understand that Titans are gods in a different way than Olympians. He beareth forever and ever the burden and poise of the sky, the vault of the rolling heaven, and earth re-echoes his cry. And exactly the same way that the Aesir and Vanir are gods in the same way, but different ways. The Titans and the Olympians are gods in the same way, but different ways. So when, like, people want to tell you that, like, the Greeks knew the difference in the Olympic and the chthonic gods, they're kind of lying. They're kind of misspeaking when people say that the Greeks knew their gods better. The Greek poets knew their gods better than the Scandinavian poets knew their gods. Kind of what they're saying is that Ovid knew his gods better than Snorri Sturluson knew their gods. It's very different. He beareth forever and ever forever and ever the burden and poise of the sky, the vault of the rolling heaven, and earth re-echoes his cry. The depth of the sea are troubled, they mourn from their caverns profound, and the darkest and innermost hell moans deep with a sorrowful sound. And the rivers of waters that flow from the fountains that spring without stain are as one in the great lamentation, and moan for thy piteous pain. Prometheus responds, Deem not that I in pride or willful scorn restrain my speech. 'Tis wistful memory that rends my heart when I behold myself abased to wretchedness. To these new gods I and none other gave their lots of power and full attainment. No more words hereof I speak. The tale ye know, but listen now unto the rede of mortals and their woes, and how their childish and unreasoning state was changed by me to consciousness and thought. Yet not in blame of mortals will I speak, but as in proof of service wrought to them. For in the outside eyes they had and saw not, and ears they had, but heard not. Age on age, like unsubstantial shapes and visions seen, they groped at random in the world of sense, nor knew in link to their building brick with brick, nor how to turn its aspect to the sun, nor how to join the beams by carpentry. In hollowed caves they dwelt, as emmets dwell, weak feathers for each blast, in sunless caves, nor had they certain forecast of the cold, nor of the advent of the flowery spring, nor of the fruitful summer. All they wrought, unreasoning they wrought, till I made clear the laws of rising stars and inference dim, more hard to learn of what their setting showed. I taught to them with all their art of arts the lore of number and the written word, that giveth sense to sound, the tool wherewith the gift of memory was wrought in all, and so came art and song. I too was first to harness neath the yoke strong animals, obedient made to collar and to weight, that they might bear whatever of heaviest toil mortals endured before. For chariots too I trained in docile service of the rein, steeds, the delight of wealth and pomp and pride. I too, none other, for seafarers wrought their ocean-roaming canvas-winged cars. Such arts of craft did I, unhappy I, contrive for mortals. Now, no feint I have whereby I may elude my present woe. And when he says now, no feint, what he means is no lie. And so, like I told you, the Book of Enoch lists the same crimes, but the Book of Enoch might be from 200 CE. It might be 750 years older than this book, younger than this book. And so what I do is I stress test. I don't fact check. I stress test claims. And so when I see two religions in particular, and a person in my comments that I recently muted and hid from my ever being aware of ever again, when I notice a superiority, intellectual or religious superiority, so when I notice breaking your teeth on YouTube or Muslims or a certain kind of Christian in public, I notice that what they make is claims of intellectual superiority, religious superiority. They make claims of superiority. And so what I do is I trace where that claim comes from. Okay, well, if a claim is like the Olympic torch, who carried that claim? Where did they pick it up from? And where was it first lit? Where was that flame first lit? And Prometheus is telling us in this story that he first lit the flame, right? Or rather, he first gave the first human the ability to light the first human flame. And so what I listened to is I listened to all this list of all these things that Prometheus gave to humanity. What I hear is a list of things that exist in the category of knowledge of good and evil. I hear Prometheus saying that he gifted humanity the knowledge of good and evil. And that is a phrase that I am familiar with from my own superior Christian upbringing. I was raised in a Jehovah's Witness church that took the most hyperbolic superior position possible because Jehovah's Witness is evil as a church. Watchtower is evil as an intellectual organization. And that's hard to say, so I've distracted myself as I said it. But there's a reason that even if Paul is correct and the Greeks did make a shrine to the nameless God, being the nameless God of the Jews, even if they did do that, Greek, Hellenic, Roman, Mediterranean, Levantine people weren't majority monotheists in the prescribed First Temple way. In fact, I'd say that something like 1% of human beings before the destruction of the first and even the second temple lived in the way that Deuteronomy describes as the appropriate way to live as a Levantine person, even as a human person. And so what I'm saying is that if there were Christians, if there were Jewish proselytizers who were going about their proselytization similar to the way that it's done today from a position of superiority, Greek people would find it very difficult to convert to Judaism because Judaism has huge gaps and the specificity of God's nature. How do I know that? Because Christian theology happened. And Christian theology happened for about 1,000 years, maybe as many as 1,200 years before Jewish mysticism began to start writing itself down and taking itself seriously as a contra-argument or a specific cultural approach. And all of that is, give or take, 2,000 years after this play. So if ancient Greek people are hearing, Jewish proselytizers, which wasn't a thing that existed, it wasn't legal to do that, but if they heard Jewish proselytizers, they would laugh, frankly, at how low the resolution of their worldview is. It would be like if today I were to be trying to put a movie in theater that was still in the 3:4 aspect ratio. It's not even in the 720p of high def. You would laugh. You would laugh that I even thought that it was a good idea. And I'm not talking about a vintage story. I'm talking about, like, if I were to try to make a Marvel movie today, a big budget movie, and I were to insist on filming it on 1990s tech, you'd be like, why? And I'm not saying that it's the right thing to do, but that's what they did do. You can also read their literature. That's where Irenaeus got the idea to write against heresies, because the Greeks were already doing it. They were already doing it. Because you want to talk about, like, being an insular culture. Well, how do you be an insular culture? Well, you be better. You be better culturally at everything that everybody around you does. Because Greece, even in this story, what he's saying is that the rule of Zeus goes all the way back to the development of the Indo-European language family in the Caspian Pontic steppe in the Caucasus Mountains. He's talking about the formation of Caucasian skin-colored people. He is on purpose, the author of this is on purpose differentiating his mythology, in fact, his cosmogony, his creation myth, from brown-skinned people like Semitics and Africans, like the Egyptians, Libyans, Ethiopians, people that Aeschylus has already introduced, he knows a lot about. You could know a lot about a lot back then. You could. It was easy. You just talk to people. Just do what I do. You don't even have to read. All I do is listen to people talk. And it's easy today because people, I don't know if you know this, very smart people record themselves talking. Okay, so anyway, he explains that he contrived to make mortal lives better by giving them everything that humans do that monkeys and apes don't do. And he did it all for the Indo-European people specifically. Am I saying that right? Indo-European. Yes, I am. His claim is that he did it specifically for the Indo-European people, and that the Indo-European people gifted all of these things to the Semitic and broader African peoples. And this is where your later 19th and 20th century racists got the idea. They got the idea that no, wait a minute, an Indo-European gave all of the gifts to civilization. Everybody thought that these things were bad because we thought they were good, because they're reading this wrong. But they're just wrong. The archaeology doesn't play that out at all. It doesn't really seem that Indo-European innovated much besides this mythical system that allows them to compete with their storytelling. To which the chorus responds, "A rueful doom is thine, distraught of soul and all astray, and like some sorry leech art thou, repining at thine own dis-ease, unskilled, unknowing of the needful cure." And so disease is a word that pisses me off in the modern world, because dis-ease is just any uncomfort. Prometheus responds to this quote about his dis-ease, "More wilt thou wonder, when the rest thou hearest, what arts for them, what methods I devised. Foremost was this: if any man fell sick, no aiding art he knew, no saving food, no curing oil nor draught, but all in lack. Of remedies they dwindled, till I taught the medicinal blending of soft drugs, whereby they ward each sickness from their side. I ranged for them the methods manifold of the diviner's art. I first discerned which of night's visions hold a truth for day. I read for them the lore of mystic sounds, inscrutable before, the omens seen which bless or ban a journey, and the flight of crook-clawed birds did I make clear to man, and how they soar upon the right, for weal, how on the left, for evil, how they dwell, each in its kind, and what their loves and hates, and which can flock and roost in harmony. From me, men learned what deep significance lay in the smoothness of the entrails set for sacrifice, and which, of various hues, showed them a gift accepted of the gods. They learned what streaked and varied comeliness of gall and liver told. I led them too, by passing through the flame the thigh bones wrapped in rolls of fat and the undivided chine, unto the mystic and perplexing lore of omens, and I cleared unto their eyes the forecasts, dim and indistinct before, shown in the flickering aspect of a flame. And so you understand on some level, it's very warm where I'm sitting, and so I'm going to stand up for a while. I need about $30 to get a new pair of pants, because these jeans do not breathe worth a damn. And because of my pelvic injury, sometimes I am incontinent. And the other day while I was walking, I definitely pissed all in the good pants that I have. So I could walk down and do, when I get dehydrated, I get incontinent. And so it's just a risk that one runs when one has a severe pelvic injury like I do. And so I need about $30 to get a new pair of pants. To justify going down and doing laundry, because getting all sweaty and gross in these jeans is going to necessitate another laundry trip as soon as I get that stuff out of the laundry. And so anyway, I'm standing for a while to maybe find a slightly cooler spot. The sun is directly above me, and as you can see, I don't provide myself shade in this spot. What I need to do is I need to get positive feedback for doing this, and then I need to just be prepared now that I know about how much I can get out of this with about how much battery, and just go across yonder way up into the woods. Up there's a really nice hill with a decently flat shaded spot that I could set up my chair, so it's all good. But it's important to acknowledge that the only person who needs to adopt a position of superiority, in order for a text to have a position of superiority, you understand? The only person who needs to adopt that position ever, in order for the culture or that expression of the culture to have had a position of authority, is one singular author. And so on some level, if what Aeschylus is doing here is listing every single kind or potential for prophecy, then on some level what he's doing is adopting a position of intellectual superiority, where he's saying, I know all of them, I know how all of them work, and I know that all of them came from Prometheus, which is different than, for example, a Jewish person would and does argue throughout their texts that any kind of oracle is coming from God, and if it's not coming from God, it's coming from a kind of dualistic evil that requires Zoroastrianism in a way that Hellenic Judaism literally couldn't have argued with, because that doesn't happen until like 250 BCE. So we move on. But anyway, I mean, even if Zoroastrianism does come out of the Zagros Mountains 2,500 years BCE, this author, right, Aeschylus, is telling us that dualism is present in the competition between Prometheus and Zeus. Okay, Prometheus continues. Of these, enough is said. The other boons stored in the womb of earth, in aid of men, copper and iron, silver, gold withal, who dares affirm he found them ere I found them? None, well I know, save who would babble lies. Know thou, in compass of a single phrase, all arts for mortal use Prometheus gave. And so this is a worship poem, a worship praise play. You know, like how Christians will make movies about like the Jewish patriarchs and stuff. That's what this is. And so ultimately it is trying to give praise to Prometheus. It does want the viewer to walk away and like burn a sacrifice in his honor and like hope that Zeus lets him go someday, which is something that people will do. I've read ghost stories. This is something people will do for humans later, because this thinking, not this story, but this thinking is endemic to humans. Most specifically, it's endemic to the Indo-European language family, and that's on some level what I believe Aeschylus is teaching us. And I'm actually going to front what the response is about, because what I just said, that the author might be wanting people to leave and give sacrifices or gifts or whatever, make prayers in the name of Prometheus for Zeus. He's already told Oceanus not to do this, right? And he's talking with the chorus. And so if the author is putting that in the people's minds, he also needs to make them aware that doing so can be blasphemy, and moreover, that Prometheus didn't necessarily do this because he loved humanity. There's no John 3:16 happening here, where because Prometheus so loved his creation, he gave his own life for them. That's kind of entirely, in fact, that's explicitly what's just not happening in this book, in this particular scene. And I know that because the chorus responds, "Nay, aid not mortal men beyond their due, holding too light a reckoning of thyself and of thine own distress." The reason they say that is because you could leave this play, this show, and you could have the idea that if you make a sacrifice in Prometheus's name, that you can circumvent Zeus to get what you want. And that is black magic. That is black magic. And so the poet, the writer, the playwright is making it explicit. Don't do that dumb shit. That's dumb shit. And she explains it by saying, "Good hope have I to see thee once again from fetters free, and matched with Zeus and parity of power." Parity of power. And so we're talking about something that's in conflict with Zeus and parity to its power. So we're talking about a demiurge 500 years before Gnostic Christianity. I said 500, I meant 750. And we're talking about a dualism. We're talking about a dualism. So we're talking about Prometheus is sort of a Angra Mainyu to Ahura Mazda. But what the author is making you aware of is that Zeus is kind of the Angra Mainyu. He is the source of all evil. He is the capricious one that does things to harm humans so that humans can't advance beyond what Zeus sees them as. Zeus wanted them to forever be apes. He wanted us to forever be the Homo sapiens before Neanderthal disappeared. Like, he wanted us to forever exist in the Ice Age. Effectively, what he's arguing is that the Ice Age was God's fault, right? That if there was a lost civilization in the ideas of these alt history people, and this is where they got this idea. This is where the idea originally sprang from, with the Thule cult as an example. That if God wanted us to be as advanced as we were by 500 BC, we could have been that advanced 10,000 years before. So why weren't we? Because of the will of God. And so by 500 BCE, we're talking about looking at the will of God and going, well, wait a minute, the will of God doesn't seem to be what's best for humanity. And so that's where the demiurge and Gnosticism comes from. That's where the Yaldabaoth comes from. And see, the Yaldabaoth and the Abrahamic faith traditions is blasphemy. It's blasphemy and heresy because it positions Hashem, it positions Adonai, it positions the Lord, right, the angel of the Lord. It positions the highest God as actually a subservient God that's evil and ignorant and controls this world to harm humanity. Well, where did they get the idea? Prometheus was it Prometheus that just said it? Or was it it's in this conversation, this idea that Zeus might actually be the source of evil, that it might actually be the God you pray to that causes your own limitations. Starts here with Aeschylus. he's decidedly encouraging his audience to ask, well, who do you pray to? Because this chorus, which is supposed to be the voice of the audience, is saying that we want Prometheus to be returned to his place of parity of power with Zeus, which sounds like the dual king system more like the Peloponnese have. Prometheus responds, "Not yet, nor thus hath fate ordained the end. Not until age-long pains and countless woes have bent and bowed me, shall my shackles fall. Art strives too feebly against destiny." Art here is not artifice in the sense of making things. Like craft didn't mean in the sense of making things. You know how like you might call a rat crafty, right? Or artful. You might call like a politician artful. He's talking about diplomacy's not getting me out of here. And on some level, by 500 BC, prayer, engaging at a temple, sacrifices, these things were understood transactionally. They were understood as politics. They were understood as diplomacy. And so Chorus asks, "But what hand rules the helm of destiny?" The question is, well, does Zeus control the hand of destiny? And do you know who in Greece was supposed to control destiny? Prometheus answers us. "The triform fates and furies are unforgiving." "Then is the power of Zeus more weak than theirs? He may not shun the fate ordained for him. What is ordained for him save endless rule?" And so these are the questions that the audience is asking. These aren't random questions. These are deep theological questions. Prometheus responds, "Seek not for answer. This thou mayst not learn." And what does Jesus say when the disciples ask him of the day of his return, when the day that God is going to make himself known to all humankind and there will be no longer a choice but to believe? What does he say? That's incalculable. You don't get to know that. And what happened in the ghost book that I read for you when somebody encountered in a necromantic ceremony a ghost and asked them, well, when is the end of time coming? The ghost said, well, God doesn't let me say that. And so Prometheus says, "Seek not for answer, this thou mayst not learn." What do prophets and gurus and all of these people always say? Well, there's always something that you're not allowed to ask, right? And so what does the chorus respond? Because these are fully intelligent, modern, city-dwelling people. What do they say? Greeks, they say, the chorus, "Surely thy silence hides some solemn thing." Solemn meaning sacred, or severe, or very important, something that we just don't really talk about, or that will make you serious and really think seriously. And Prometheus responds, "Think on some other theme. 'Tis not the hour, this secret to unveil. In deepest dark be it concealed. By guarding it shall I escape at last from bonds and scorn and pain." And so what he's saying is that there are some things that just can't be said, and that if he goes long enough and is able to prove faith that he will keep his secret, then God, Zeus, will let him out of hell. And the chorus asks, "Oh, never may my weak and faint desire strive against God most high, never be slack in service, never tire of sacred loyal tie, nor fail to wend unto the altar side, wherewith the blood of kine streams up the offering, by the quenchless tide of ocean, sire divine." That was a lot of I rhymes that all worked in English. "Be this within my heart indelible, offend not with thy tongue. Sweet, sweet it is in cheering hopes to dwell, immortal, ever young, in maiden gladness fostering evermore a soft content of soul. But I shudder at thine anguish sore, thy doom through years that roll. Thou couldst not cower to Zeus, a love too great thou unto man hast given. Too high of heart thou wert, thankless fate! What aid 'gainst wrath of heaven could mortal man afford? In vain thy gift to things so powerless. Couldst thou not see? They are as dreams that drift, their strength is feebleness. A purblind race. That's a hard word to say, and I don't know what it means. A purblind race, in hopeless fetters bound, they have no craft or skill that could o'erreach the ordinance profound of the eternal will. Alas, Prometheus, on thy woe condign, I looked and learned this lore, and a new strain floats to these lips of mine. Not the glad song of yore, when the lustral wave I sang to thee, my sister made thy bride, decked with thy gifts, thy loved Hesione, I guess, and clasped unto thy side. I don't know who Hesione is, but Io enters the scene horned like a cow. And so if you remember the Suppliant Maidens, she was talking about how Bastet, I think, is the cat god, Hathor of the Greeks. The Suppliant Maiden chorus was talking about how Hathor of the Greeks was Hathor of the Egyptians was the same same god as the Io of the Greeks. That was really hard for me to spit out. Sometimes words, they just really want to sit on the front of my tongue and spit themselves out of my mouth. I get very excited. But anyway, Io from the Suppliant Maidens myth, who was turned by Hera into a cow and then cursed by Hera to have a gadfly bite her on the ass until she climbed all the way, you can't see me draw it, but climbed all the way up out of Greece, went down the Levantine shore, across the Red Sea into Egypt, the exact opposite direction that Moses and the Jews went. So this is a path that people knew. He went the exact opposite direction that Abraham went. Here she is, showing up in the underworld beneath the access point gained through the Straits of Gibraltar. And I just said that. The Straits of Gibraltar, also known as the Pillars of Heracles, you understand that's the place where 300,000 years ago, Africa and Europe collided, and the Atlantic Ocean was pinched off from the Mediterranean, and the Mediterranean evaporated, and the Nile carved a canyon, I think I heard 300 times the size of the Grand Canyon across northern Africa into the Mediterranean, and then backfilled itself with silt because it was evaporating almost as quickly as it could get to the Mediterranean. And that's why Egypt is so fertile. That was 300,000 years ago. At some point they pulled back apart in the Strait of Gibraltar. The Pillars of Heracles are the place where the Atlantic Ocean runs into the Mediterranean. Under that is where Prometheus is, and that's why he's spoken with the chorus of the dryads or whatever, the spirits of the Mediterranean, and with the goddess of the Atlantic. And now here we have this interconnecting god that connects the European Greek to the African Egyptians. Io, the horned cow, enters, and I need to give her, it's hard for me to do women's voices. Alack, what land, what force are here? Whom see I clenched in rocky fetters drear unto the stormy crag? For what thing done dost thou in agony atone? Tell me whither, well a day, my feet have roamed their weary way. But it maddens, the sting, it burns in my piteous side. But the vision, the spectre, the earthborn, the myriad-eyed, avoid thee, earth, Hide him, thine offspring, he cometh, O aspect of ill, ghostly and crafty of face and dead, but pursuing me still. Ah, woe upon me, woe ineffable! He steals upon my track, a hound of hill. Wherever I stray, along the sands and brine, weary and foodless, come his creeping eyne. And the ghostly sound, the wax stopped, reed flutes weird, and drowsy drone. Alack, my wandering woes that round and round lead me in many mazes lost, fordone. Oops. O child of Kronos, for what deed of wrong am I enthralled by thee in penance long? Why by the stinging bruise, the thing of fear, dost thou torment me, heart and brain? Nay, give me rather to the flames that sear, or to some hidden grave, or to the rending jaws, the masters of the main. Nor grudge the boon for which I crave, O king. Enough, enough of weary wandering, pangs from which none can save. Hearken, in pity hold, Io, the ox-horned maid, thy love of old. That was beautiful. I'm sorry, some of these I just really love. Their entry poems are literally just a list of, like, their characteristics, their traits. It's just the poet showing off, like, how well he knows the character. And that's what an entry scene should be in all art. When your character first walks on scene, you should know them after they stop speaking. The first thing they said, no matter how pithy, no matter how long the dialogue, you should know them intuitively as soon as they're done speaking. And then the reaction to them should confirm what you know about them. So Prometheus says, "Hear, Zeus or not, I hear and know thee well. Daughter of Inachus, I know thee driven, stung by the gadfly, mazed with agony. I, thou art she whose beauty fired the breast of Zeus with passion, she whom Hera's hate now harasses o'er leagues and leagues of land." We know this character. This is brilliant. Masterful. Masterful. This is why I do this, and I read this with my time instead of watching television. Have for decades, because this is better. This is just better. Io responds, I'm not going to get it right, but "Alack, thou namest Inachus, my sire. Wottest thou of him? How from lips of pain comes to my woeful ears truth's very strain." Wottest, W-O-T-T. You know how there's that gif, the W-O-T, Watt? That Watt, W-O-T-T, means no. Like, what do you know? "How comest thou the curse, the burning fire, the God-sent piercing pest that stings and clings? Ah me, in frenzied, foodless wanderings, hither I come, and on me from on high lies Hera's angry craft. Ah, men unblessed! Not one there is, not one that is unblessed as I. But thou, tell me the rest. Utter the rede of woes to come for me. Utter the aid, the cure, if aid or cure there be." And so, what he's doing is he's showing that Zeus isn't the only of the Olympian gods who curses capriciously. He's showing that Hera is also kind of a bitch. Zeus and Hera are a couple made for one another. Prometheus says, "Lo, clearly will I show forth all thy quest, not in dark speech, but with such simple phrase as doth befit the utterance of a friend. I am Prometheus, who gave fire to men." "O daring, proven champion of man's race, what sin, Prometheus, dost thou thus atone?" "One moment since I told my woes and ceased." "Then should I plead my suit to thee in vain?" "Nay, speak thy need, naught would I hide from thee." "Pronounce who nailed thee to the rocky cleft." "Zeus, by intent, Hephaestus, by his hand." "For what wrongdoing do these pains atone?" And this is for anyone who decided they weren't going to show up for the first half of the show. You understand that he's repeating himself. He's like, hey, you showed up You should have showed up for the first half. I already did this part, but fine, I'll do it for anybody in the back who wasn't paying attention. What I have said is said. Suffice it to thee. Yet somewhat add, forewarn me in my woe, what time shall bring my wanderings to its goal? For knowledge is for sorrow, ask it not. Nay, hide not from my destiny's decree. Prometheus. I grudge thee not the gift which I withhold. Then wherefore tarry ere thou tell me all? Nothing I grudge, but would not rack thy soul. Be not compassionate beyond my wish. Well, thou art fain, and I will speak. Attend. So you understand that what she just said is like if you still have foresight, because that's what you are, your name is foresight, forethought, tell me the end of my days. Like if you can still do prophecy, like at least tell me when my suffering will be over. Because that's what like the ghosts in the Middle Ages, like that's what they wanted to know, was when their suffering would be over. And so they would come back and they would tell people how to end it once they had found out. That's kind of what the afterlife was in their conception. And so she's saying, well, if you can still do it, tell me. And he's like, I don't want to. And she's like, well, please, I know that it, that it will only hurt me. And he goes, fine, if you're fain here being not vain, but like, if you know that what you're doing is being foolish, if you're aware of your foolishness, is kind of what fain means. And then the chorus breaks in to say, nay, ere thou speak, ere means before. Hear me, bestow on me a portion of the grace of granted prayers. First let us learn how Io's frenzy came, she telling her disasters manifold. Then of their sequel let her know from thee. Prometheus responds, well were it, Io, thus to do their will. Right well, they are the sisters of thy sire. 'Tis worth the waste and effluence of time to tell, with tears of perfect moan, the doom of sorrows that have fallen, when 'tis sure the listeners will greet the tale with tears. Io. I know not how I should mistrust your prayer. Therefore the whole that ye desire of me ye shall now learn in one straightforward tale. Yet, as it leaves my lips, I blush with shame to tell that tempest of the spite of heaven, and all the wreck and ruin of my form, and whence they swooped upon me. Woe is me! Long in visions of the night there came voices and forms into my maiden bower, alluring me with smoothly glozing words. I want to break in real quick and say that, like, if Prometheus is acting the role of the Pharmacon, and the Pharmacon's role is to speak the future and tell you how you can end your suffering, and they can be wrong, and they can be killed for being wrong, Prometheus has to do what he then does. The chorus stepping in and saying, whoa, you're going to do more harm than good if you just tell her how she dies. You got to know who she is better. You got to let her speak for herself before you just tell her story. You see what I'm saying? Just because the audience knows this character very well doesn't mean that it doesn't strip this female of her agency to not speak for herself. Let her speak her own curse into being. Like, don't just tell her, don't just mansplain to her why she's cursed. Let her figure it out by talking it out to forethought. And that's important, because people talk about this being a people that didn't allow women agency. And if that's true, then why the fuck is this poet insisting that this woman should be allowed agency through the voice of the chorus? Io doesn't advocate for her agency. The audience advocates for her agency, which means that the audience absolutely understood the agency of women. They also understood the hierarchy of beings, and that some people weren't allowed to express their agency at all times. And as a person with pathological demand avoidance, intermittent explosive disorder, and bipolar type 2, all diagnosed and treated, I can absolutely tell you that 95% of the time is when your agency is irrelevant to the situation. She continues, O maiden highly favored... Oh, I'm sorry, this continues to be Io. O maiden highly favored of high heaven, why cherish thy virginity so long? Thine is to win wedlock's noblest crown. Know that Zeus's heart through thee is all aflame, pierced with desire as through a dart, and longs to join in utmost rite of love with thee. Therefore, O maiden, shun not with disdain the embrace of Zeitz, but high... I don't know what Zeitz is, probably whatever the word zeitgeist means. This guy reaches to French and German words sometimes when they're fewer syllables. The embraced of Zeitz, but hie thee forth straightway to the lush growth of Lerna's meadowland, where are the flocks and steadings of thy home, and let Zeus's eye be eased of its desire. Night after night, haunted by dreams like these, heartsick, I ventured at the last to tell unto my sire these visions of the dark. Sire being her own father. And it's important that I let you know that all of that last bit was in italics. And the italics, I believe, are where they're quoting older poems, other plays. To Delphi and to far Dodona's shrine, being fall fain to learn what deed or word would win him favor from the powers of heaven. But they came back repeating oracles, mystic, ambiguous, inscrutable, till, at the last, an utterance direct, obscure no more, was brought to Inachus, a peremptory charge to fling me forth beyond my home and fatherland, a thing sent loose in banishment o'er all the world. And should he falter, Zeus should launch on him a fire-eyed bolt to shatter and consume himself and all his race to nothingness. Bowing before such utterance from the shrine of Loxias, he drave me from our halls, bearing the gates against me. Loth he was to do, as I to suffer this despite. But the strong curb of Zeus had overborne his will to meward, as I parted thence, in form and mind I grew dishumanized, and horned, as now ye see me, poison-stung by the envenomed bitings of the brise, I leapt and flung in frenzy, rushed away to the bright waters of Kirknea's stream and Lerna's beach, but ever at my side a herdsman by my heifer, but ever at my side a herdsman by his heifer, Argus moved, earthborn, malevolent of mood, and peered with myriad eyes where'er my feet would roam. And we remember this story, because it was the last one I read to you. But something that I want to point out here is that if these characters are human, the curse that is put upon them is not the transformation. Understand that, first and foremost. Understand what Aeschylus is telling us. The curse is not the transformation. What does not happen is that Hera goes, you're a cow now, you've got gadflies now. That's not what happened. The curse that happens is that Hera goes, bad thing happened to you, you're immortal now. You don't get to die. You get to deal with the consequences of that thing that you either chose or that I chose for you for fucking ever. Because the authors, the audience too, understand that this is a myth. This isn't what actually happened. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to articulate a certain kind of emotional state. And what happens when people groups, like Moses' Jews, experience an emotional state for a prolonged period of time. What's his name? William James talks about this when individuals experience an emotional state, especially suffering and isolation for a long period of time, that what it leads to is the religious experience. And so what he's saying is that our religion, at least Io, the temple, the cult of Io, was formed out of prolonged suffering because Io, whatever Io means, that concept, that goddess, is immortal. So if she was human once, she became immortal. But she didn't become immortal by becoming a cow. She became a cow by suffering in the way that is symbolic of cattle for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And then Hera doubled down by giving her the gadfly to drive her away from her original people who had begun to worship her. With myriad eyes, wherever my feet would roam. But on him in a moment unforeseen came fate, and sundered him from my life. But I, still maddened by the gadfly's sting, the scourge of God's infliction, roamed the weary world. Does this remind you of any biblical characters? Wasn't the punishment that God gave to Cain for killing Abel immortality? Isn't the ultimate reward that God gives to his prophet Enoch, I believe, a deathless death? Still, maddened by the gadfly's sting, the scourge of God's infliction, roamed the weary world. How I have fared, thou hearest. Be there aught of what remains to bear, aught means nothing, that thou canst tell. Speak on, but let not thy compassion warm thy words, that's hard to say, and compassion warm thy words to cheering falsehood. Worst of woes are words that break their promise to our hope. To which the chorus responds, Woe, woe avaunt, thou and thy tale of bane! Oh, never, never dared I dream such horror of strange sounds should pierce mine ear. And so there you go. The truth of how she transformed is horrific. It's meant to be. Such loathly sights, such tortures hard to bear, outrage, pollution, agony supreme, wasting my heart with double edge of pain. Ah, fate, I gaze on Io's dole and shudder to my soul. Prometheus then says, Thou wailest all too soon, fulfilled of fear. Tarry a while, till thou hast learned the whole. Say on, reveal it, says chorus. Suffering souls are fain to know aright what yet remains to bear. Lightly, with help of mine, did ye achieve that which ye first desired. From Io's mouth, crave to hear, recounted by herself, the story of her strivings. Listen now to what shall follow, to what woefulness the wrath of Hera must compel this maid. To Io, and thou, O child of Inachus, within thine inmost heart store up these words of mine, that thou mayst learn thy wanderings and their goal. First, from this spot toward the sunrise turn, and cross the steppe that knoweth not the plough. Thus to the nomad Scythians shalt thou come, who dwell in wattled homes, not built on earth, but borne along on wains of sturdy wheel, equipped themselves with bows of mighty reach. Pass them avoidingly, and leave their land, and skirt the beaches where the tides make moan, till, lo, upon the left hand thou shalt find the Chalybes, stout craftsmen of the steel. Beware of them. No gentleness is theirs, no kindly welcome to a stranger's foot. Thence to the stream of violence shalt thou come, like name, like nature. See thou come it cross, 'tis fatal to the fodder. 'Tis fatal to the forder, till thou come right to the very Caucasus, the peak that overtops the world, and from its brows the river pants to spray its wrathful stream. Thence, o'er the pinnacles that court the stars, onward and southward thou must make thy way, and reach the warlike horde of Amazons, maidens, through hate of man, and gladly they will guide thy maiden feet. That host in days that are not yet shall fix their home and dwell at the Miscria on Thermodon's bank, night whereunto the grim projecting fang of Salmydessus' cape affronts the main, the seaman's curse to ships a stepmother. Then at the jutting land, Cimmerian styled, that screens the narrowing portal of the mere, thou shalt arrive, pass o'er it, brave at heart, and ferry thee across Macaudus' ford. So shall there be great rumour evermore, and ears of mortals of thy passage strange, and Bosporus shall be that channel's name, because the ox-horned thing did pass thereby. So from the wilds of Europe wandered, or to Asia's continent thou comest at last. And so, it's not impossible it's not impossible that that Aeschylus had made this trip and interviewed these people and played the anthropologist on his way to India because Herodotus did. It's just not impossible. The only difference is that Herodotus called his play a history, and he read it as a history and as a massive book, and Asclepius was a master of the play, and so he was able to do these trilogies, and we just don't have the end. And Asia is the Indian subcontinent at this point. We're not talking about China, not quite. We're talking about the Asian steppe. And then so he, to the chorus, he says, he was talking to Io, now he's talking to the chorus. And ye, what think ye? Seems he not that lord and tyrant of the gods is tyrannous unto all other lives? A high god's lust constrained this mortal maid to roam the world. To Io, poor maid, a brutal wooer sure was thine. For know that all which I have told thee now is scarce the prelude of thine woes to come. Io, alas for me, alas. Prometheus, again thou criest with a heifer's low. What wilt thou do, learning thy future woe? The chorus, what, hast thou further sorrows for her to hear? Prometheus, yea, a vexed ocean of predestined pain. Io, what profit then is life to me? Ah, why did I not cast me from this stubborn crag? So with one spring, one crash upon the ground I had attained surcease from all my woes. Better is it to die one death outright than linger out long myth in misery. I disagree with her, but obviously so does she, because she doesn't follow through on the act. But it's important that you understand that, like, Prometheus and Shaggy Philoletea are archetypes of speaking truths that you don't necessarily want to hear. And so what she's asking him is, like, what point is there in persevering? And so if you've been on my Patreon, you may have seen that I wrote an essay sometime around February called The Pointed and the Pointless. And I was asking the same question, like, what point in me continuing to write my journals that I eventually stopped publishing because nobody was reading them or commenting on them or liking them just to let me know they were reading them. Because those analytics, I can't trust that the eyeball is a read. I can trust that the eyeball is a link clicked, but I can also trust that it's a bot link clicked. Like, I don't believe those are real human beings. Like, when Twitter tells me I have 2,500 views, but 9 likes, it's like I have 9 views. I have 9 views. And that's maybe not a fair way to view the analytics, but it's how I keep myself from getting overexcited and then asking myself, again, what's the point? Because, like, what is the point? Is the point on this video to get a like? Is the point for that subscription on my Patreon and that email that I got from Mr. S that said, you changed my fucking life? Which one is it? Is the point for you to compliment me and say, oh, I love your voice, or oh, you got such a pretty face, or oh, it's so beautiful behind you, or, you know, or is the point for you to say, your reading of that changed the way I think about reading anything? Because the first thing, and I should maybe not tell his story out of school, but the first thing Mr. S asked me was, what else can I read? Having read the first episode that you presented, Vincent, of the last Sandcastle, I didn't know that literature could be engaging. What else can I read? What else can I engage with in my life? To the point that, and sorry, Mr. S, if you listen to this and you don't like me telling the story, I'm telling the story so you can hear it, but you ultimately do need to speak for yourself, as the author says. And maybe you can choose to do that if you want to come out of anonymity in the comments. I would highly encourage it. But I don't even remember what I was talking about. You know, what else can I read? I've never found literature engaging. I didn't know that it could be. And then what he did is, over the course of a month, he immediately burned himself out, because what he doesn't understand, what you don't understand, is, like, I can sit and I can do this for hours. This is This is an hour and a half on this video. I think that I've already got another 2 hours on another video. I could do this. You don't want to talk about like an 8-hour, a 12-hour a day job. I could do this all day. I've been saying this to you since September. I've really been saying this to you for 2 hours, but I could do this all day long, every single day, and often I do with Gemini. 14, 16 hours sometimes I'll go with Gemini when I'm feeling manic and I just need to get an idea, an emotion expressed. But like if you showed up to work and you worked for 8 hours and nobody paid you anything, would you come back? And so like on some level, yeah, I am waiting on that tip, and I'm waiting on that comment with the tip that says you changed things for me, right? That's what this is about. And that's what Prometheus is like. Well, not Prometheus, Io, she's asking like, well, now that you, Shaggy Philalitea, have told me these things that have changed my life and I'm burned out, what am I supposed to do with this? I'm burned out now. What am I supposed to do? Is it always going to suck like this? And what Prometheus is probably going to say, or what he could say if this were infinitely long, is yes. But this is what he does say. Ill wouldst thou bear these agonies of mine, mine, with whose fate it standeth not to win the goal of death, which were release from pain. And so what he's saying is, like, you're so weak of heart, your perseverance is so pitiful that you wouldn't survive being bolted to this rock the way I am. Now there is set no limit to my woe, till Zeus be hurled from his omnipotence. To which Io responds, Zeus hurled from pride of place, can such things be? Thou wert full fain, methinks, to see the sight. Even so, his overthrow, who wrought my pain? Then mayst thou know thereof, such fall shall be. And who shall wrench the scepter from his hand? By his own mindless counsels shall he fall. And so Prometheus is saying that some days even Zeus too will fall. Even Zeus will fall. And so that's not irrelevant to Christian theology, right? Even Jesus, even God will be born to die a man, is kind of what this is saying. And Io asks, and how, unless the telling harm, say all? Prometheus, wooing a bride, his ruin he shall win. And this is why I very firmly believe, and I've talked about it in public, I've talked about it on video, I have other videos where I talked about it, but I very firmly believe that what happened with the Jesus cult is actually that Mary Magdalene was John's wife and Jesus wooed her. And that's what happened, that Mary did get pregnant, and the reason I meant Peter. The reason Peter was so upset by the way it all played out, and the reason he was so different from the rest of the apostles, is because Jesus did him dirty. And so Prometheus says, wooing a bride, his ruin he shall win. And then Io, goddess or mortal, tell me if thou mayst. No matter which, more must not be revealed. Doth then a consort thrust him from his throne? The child she bears him shall o'ercome his sire. And eventually Apollo does. Climb to that height. Io asks, and hath he no avoidance of this doom? None, surely, till that I, released from bonds. And you could even think of Constantine as fulfilling that prophecy as the embodiment of Sol Invictus, because he saw himself through Christianity as releasing Prometheus's fire, the occult fire, to the lowest levels of his empire. And then Io asks, who can release thee but by will of Zeus? And Prometheus, fate gives this duty to a child of thine. How? shall a child of mine undo thy woes? And so the author of Asclepius in the 500 BCE is suggesting that actually it's going to be somebody educated with Egyptian magic who's going to finish the secrets of the ancient evolution of humans from Homo sapiens to Homo sapiens sapiens. You understand? This is something that, like in his book, The Coming Race, Edward Bulwer, I believe is his name, was also a member of the Thule, Thule, Thule cult. And Tool, the band, in some way, are in a cheeky way referencing Tool, the cult. And that Tool cult set the foundation for all of the weird occult esoteric nonsense the Nazis believed. And so in a lot of ways, Edward Bulwer is not one of those people that we should remember fondly, and one of the ways that we choose to remember him unfondly is as the writer of the sentence or the opening line to a novel, "It was a dark and stormy night." But that opening isn't actually as bad as his contributions to religion and eugenics. My point here is that when you're talking about modern reptilians having secret magics or pillars beneath the pyramids or an Akashic record buried under the paw of the Sphinx, all of those ideas came from this line, where Prometheus says that it's going to come from the stock of Io, whom he's already connected to Egypt. And so I have the intuition, I have the personal opinion that the authors of Torah were writing as many as 300 years after this book, and that they were very well aware of their cultural and religious competition, because they had just spent however many hundreds of years in exile, and they just watched their cousins, the Judeans, that is, the Judeans had just watched their cousins, the 11 other tribes of Israel, be destroyed something like 500 years before that. And so I am of the opinion that the Jewish people who made the Torah and the other more modern books like Job, Daniel, Deuteronomy, all of the post First Temple books, basically everything that's not written by a prophet directly, I'm of the opinion that all of those books were read by people who had read, for example, Prometheus Bound and its trilogy, or at least had seen the play, had heard it, were aware of it, were aware of the theological arguments within it, were aware of the claims being made and the conclusions being arrived at, and then deliberately wrote their book, the Torah, the Pentateuch, the 5 books, deliberately wrote that to have a contra opinion and to portray their God in a different way, but they still used the framework of the Indo-European migration out of the Caucasus, because it pre-existed the Hebrew understanding of themselves as migrating out of Egypt, because the only place the Hebrew language migrated out of was Saudi Arabia. There's just no fucking way that the Hebrew Semitic language was born in North Africa if none of the other Semitic languages were born in North Africa, and none of the North African languages are remotely Semitic until after the Arabs come and conquer all of North Africa. You see what I'm saying? We have a history. We allow for a history of the religious texts that allows Islam to have existed thousands of years before it did, because the Arabic language did. But if the Arabic language were making the core claim that it has the same, it's in the same language family as the Hebrew, and so whenever Hebrew talks shit about Arab people, they're talking about their own people. They're not talking about a people that they joined like they did the Canaanites, when they emerged from Saudi Arabia into the Levant, which was already Greek-speaking, or at least Proto-Greek-speaking. Then Islam would have legs to stand on, but it just doesn't have legs to stand on. Islam needs a giant dumpster and it needs to be left in it forever. Islam in some way needs the punishment that Prometheus got for the crimes that were accused of Prometheus. Islam has actually done. They've set fire to a crowded room. Okay, and so Prometheus answers when Io asks who can release him but the will of Zeus, that fate gives this to a duty of the child to a duty of hers, right? Gives this duty to a child of hers, right? And so she asks who the child is, and he says, "Yea, of thy lineage 13 times removed. Dark beyond guessing grows thine oracle," Io says. Then Prometheus, "Yea, seek not, therefore, to foreknow thy woes. As thou didst proffer hope, withdraw it not. 2 tales I have, choose, for I grant thee one. And which be they? Reveal and leave me choice. I grant it. Shall I in all clearness show the future woes, or my deliverance?" "Nay, of the 2, vouchsafe her wish to her," the chorus interject, "and mine to me, deigning a truth to each. To her reveal her future wanderings, to me thy future savior, as I crave." And then Prometheus says, "I will not set myself to thwart your will, withholding aught of what ye crave to know. First to thee, Io, will I tell and trace thy sacred circuitous wanderings. Mark it well, deep and retentive tablets of the soul, when thou hast overpassed the ferry's flow that sunders continent from continent, straight to the eastward and the flaming face of dawn, and highways trodden by the sun. Pass, till thou come until the windy land of daughters born to Boreas. Beware, lest the strong spirit of the stormy blast snatch thee aloft and sweep thee to the void, on wings of raving wintry hurricane. Wind by the noisy tumult of the wave, until thou reach the Gorgon-haunted plain. Beside Sistine, in that solitude dwell Phorcys' daughters, Beldames worn with time." That might be Beldames, because it's probably French, which does actually piss me off. This is an English translation. I don't care if in 1910 it was more common for people to speak French as English-speaking literate people. Continuing on. 3, each swan-shapen, single-toothed and all, peering through shaped endowment of one eye. Never on them doth the sun shed his rays, never through radiance of the midnight moon, but hard by these, their sisters clad with wings, serpentine curled, dwell, loathed of mortal men. The Gorgons! He of men who looks on them shall gasp away his life. Of such fell guard I bid thee to beware. Now, mark my words, when I another sight of terror tell. Beware the griffin pack, the hounds of Zeus, as keen of fang as silent of their tongues. Beware the one-eyed Arimaspian band that tramp on horsehoofs, dwelling by the ford of Pluto and the stream that flows with gold. Keep thou aloof from these. To the world's end thou comest at the last, the dark-faced tribe that dwell beside the sources of the sun, where springs the river Ethiopian named. And so, like, people who say stupid things like, "Oh, ancient people are racist. Oh, they cared about the color of your skin." Yeah, they cared about the color of your skin because it was an identifier that you weren't from the same place as what we were. But what he's not doing is suggesting that all these places that Io will visit and lay seed for her cult are inferior to anywhere else. He's saying they're all the damn same. And so all of these people, all of these places in his modernity are probably arguing that they're superior to one another. And he's saying, they're all the same. And Ethiopian, the Ethiopia, right? "Make thou thy way along his banks," the Ethiopian river, whichever river in Ethiopia he's referring to. "Make thou thy way along his banks until thou come until the mighty downward slope, where from the overland of Bybline hills, Nile pours his hallowed, earth-refreshing wave." And so we've gone into North Africa, into Ethiopia, across the Red Sea, and now we're going west across the Nile into Egypt. He, by his course, Nile, shall guide thee to the realm named from himself, three-angled, water-girt. There, Io, at the last, hath fate ordained for thee and for thy race the charge to found, far from thy native shore, anew abound. Lo, I have said, if aught hereof appear hard to thy scene and inarticulate, question me o'er again and smoothly learn. God wot, I have too much of leisure here. And then the chorus says, if there be aught beyond or aught past o'er, which thou canst utter, of her woe-worn maze, speak on. If all is said, then grant to us that which we asked, as thou rememberest. And Prometheus says, she now hath learned unto its uttermost end her pilgrimage, but yet that she may know, that 'tis no futile fable she hath heard. I will recount her history of toil. Ere she came hither, let it stand for proof of what I told, my forecast to the end. So then, to sum in brief the weary tale, I turn me to thine earlier exile's close. When to Molosia's lowland thou hadst come, nigh to Dodona's cliff and ridge sublime, where is the shrine oracular and seat of Zeus, Thesprotian styled, and that strange thing in marvel past belief, the prophet oaks, that syllable his speech. Thou by their tongues with clear acclaim and unequivocal wert thus saluted. Hail, O bride of Zeus, that art to be, hast memory thereof? Thence, stung anew with frenzy, thou didst hie along the shoreward track to Rhea's lap that mighty main, then, stormily distraught, backward again, and eastward, to all time, be well assured, that inlet of the sea all mortal men shall call Ionian, in memory that Io fared thereby. Take this for proof and witness that my mind hath more in ken than ever since hath shown. To the chorus, that which remains to you and her alike I will relate, and, to my former words reverting, add this final prophecy. It's important that you understand that when they're speaking directly to the chorus, that's their way of engaging with the fourth wall by having a third character, right? By having a third party on stage, they create a fourth wall that they can then talk across. Prometheus continuing to Io, there lieth at the verge of land and sea, where Nilus issues through the silted land, a town, Canopus called, and there at length shall Zeus renew the reason in thy brain, with the mere touch and context of his hand. Fraught now with fear no more, and thou shalt bear a child, dark Epiphus, his very name, memorial of Zeus's touches that gave him life. And if you remember from the Suppliant Maidens, it's Epiphus that is the place or whatever. It's that character is involved. But moreover, what I'm thinking about, and the reason that I can't talk about what I tried to say about the Suppliant Maidens, is I'm thinking about the I can't remember what it's called, but there's a book written in Ethiopia. I think it was actually written in the European Middle Ages, right? So like the 1200s or whatever. But it imagines the son of the Queen of Sheba, Bathsheba, with Solomon. God, I wish I could remember what it was called. Cabra Nagast, maybe? Cabra Nagast, something like that. And I'm just wondering if that book isn't an attempt to update and Abrahamify this story of Epiphus. And this shall be the Folson and the fruit of all the land enriched by spreading Nile. Thence the fifth generation of his seed back unto Argos, yet unwillingly, shall flee for refuge. 50 maidens they, loathing a wedlock with their next in blood, more kin than kind from their sire's brother sprung, and on their track astir with wild desire, like falcons fierce closing on doves that flee, shall speed the suitors craving to achieve a prey forbidden, a reluctant bride. Yet Power divine shall foil them, and forbid possession of the maids, whom Argive land shall hold protected, when unsleeping hate, horror, and watchful ambush of the night have laid the suitors dead by female hands. For every maid shall smite a man to death, dying a dagger's edges in his throat. Such bed of love befall mine enemies, yet in one bride shall yearning conquer hate, bidding her spare the bridegroom at her side, blunting the keen edge of her set resolve. Thus, of two scorns the former shall she choose the name of coward, not of murderess. In Argos shall she bear, and after time, a royal offspring. Long it were to tell in clear succession all that thence shall be. Take this for sooth, that is, take it for truth. In lineage from her a hero shall arise, an archer great, and he shall be my savior from these woes. Such knowledge of the future Themis gave the ancient Titaness to me, her son. And how, and by what skill, 'twere long to say, and no wit will the knowledge profit thee. So Io says, "O woe, O rending and convulsive pain." Oh woe, oh rending and convulsive pain, frenzy and agony, again, again, searing my heart and brain. Oh dagger of the sting, unforged with fire, yet burning, burning ever. Oh my heart, pulsing with horror, beating at my breast. Oh rolling, maddening eyes, away, apart, raving with anguish dire. I spring by frenzy fiends possessed. Oh wild and whirring words that sweep in gloom down to dark waves of doom. Exit Io. That was melodramatic. And then the chorus says, "Oh well and sagely said it was, yea wise of heart was he who first gave forth in speech the thought he nursed. In thine own order see thy wed. Let not the humble heart aspire to the gross home of wealth and pride, nor be it to a hearth allied that vaunts of many a noble sire. O fates of awful emprise, never may I by Zeus be wooed, never give over my maidenhood to any god that dwells on high. A shudder to my soul is sent, beholding Io's doom forlorn, by Hera's malice put to scorn, roaming in mateless banishment. From wedlock's crown of fair desire I would not shrink an idle fear, but may no god to me draw near with shunless might and glance of fire, that with a strife wherein no chance of conquest lies, from Zeus most high, and his resolve no subtlety could win me my deliverance." Prometheus. "And yet shall Zeus for all his stubborn pride be brought to low estate. Aha! He schemes such wedlock as shall bring his doom on him, flung from his kinship, his kingship, to oblivion's lap. Aye, then the curse his father Cronos spake as he fell helpless from his age-long throne shall be fulfilled unto the utterance. No god but I can manifest to him a rescue from such a ruin as impends. I know it, aye, and how it may be foiled. Go to then, let him sit and blindly trust his skyey rumblings for security, and wave his levin with its blast of flame. All will avail him not, nor bar his fall down to dishonor vile, intolerable. So strong a wrestler is he molding now to his own proper downfall. Yea, a shape pretentious and unconquerably huge, who truly shall reveal a flame more strong than is the lightning, a crashing of sound more loud than thunder, and shall dash to naught Poseidon's trident spear, the ocean bane that makes the firm earth quiver. Let Zeus strike. Once on this rock, he speedily shall learn how far the fall from power to slavery. And the chorus says, "Beware, thy wish doth challenge Zeus himself." To Prometheus, "I voice my wish and its fulfillment too. What, dare we look for one to conquer Zeus? I, Zeus, shall wear more painful bonds than mine. Darest thou speak such taunts and tremble not? Why should I fear, who am immortal too? Yet he might doom thee to worse agony. Out on his dooming, I foreknow it all. Yet do the wise revere necessity. I, do reverence, cringe and crouch to power, whenever, wherever thou see it. But for me, I reck of Zeus as something less than naught. Let him put forth his power, attest his sway, however he will, a momentary show, a little brief authority in heaven. Aha! I see out yonder one who comes, a bidden courier, truckling at Zeus's nod, a lackey in his new lord's livery, surely on some fantastic errand sped. Enter Hermes. Thou, double-eyed and gall of bitterness, trickster and sinner against gods by giving the stolen fire to perishable men, attend! The Sire Supreme doth bid thee tell what is the wedlock which thou vauntest now, whereby he falleth from supremacy. Speak forth the whole, make all thine utterance clear, have done with words inscrutable, nor uncause to me, Prometheus, any further toil, or twofold journeying. Go to, thou seest, Zeus doth not soften at such words as thine. Pompous in sooth thy word, and swoln thy pride, says Prometheus, as doth befit the lackey of the lords. O ye young gods, how, in your youthful sway, ye deem secure your citadels of sky, beyond the reach of sorrow or of fall, have I not seen 2 dynasties of gods already flung therefrom, and soon shall see a third, that now in tyranny exults, shamed, ruined in an hour? What sayest thou? Crouch I and tremble at these stripling powers. A stripling is like a young tree, like this one, like that one, like that's a stripling power. Small homage unto such from me, or none. Betake thee hence, sweat back along thy road. Look for no answer from me. Get thee gone. Then Hermes says, think. It was such audacities of will that drove thee erst to anchorage in woe. Aye, but mark this, mine heritage of pain I would not barter for thy servitude. Hermes says, better, forsooth, be bond-slave to a crag, than true-born herald unto Zeus the sire. Take thine own coin, taunts for a taunting slave, Prometheus responds. Then Hermes, proud art thou in thy circumstance, methinks? Proud, in such pride then be my foemen set, and I to see, and of such foes art thou. What, blamest thou me for, Hermes asks, what, blamest thou me, too, for thy suffering? Make a plain word. I loathe all the gods that are, who reaped my kindness and repay with wrong. Hermes responds, I hear no little madness in thy words. Madness be mine, if scorn of foes be mad. And so what he's saying is, yeah, sure, I'm mad if it's mad to hate your enemies. And so Jesus is the one who's mad. And in Phaedrus, which we will get back to reading someday, Plato explains that love is madness, that being in love or loving a god is a form of madness. And so Jesus' love it's a form of madness. Jesus is asking you to do the insane thing by loving your enemies. Madness be mine if scorn of foes be mad. Then Hermes responds, past bearing were thy pride and happiness. And so that kind of means that, like, past bearing, like, everybody was envious of Prometheus' happiness before this, and Prometheus responds as such, ah me. And Hermes says, Zeus knoweth not of sorrow's cry. He shall! Time's lapse bringeth all lessons home. To thee it brings not yet discretion's curb. No, else I had not wrangled with a slave. He's calling Hermes a slave. He's saying that he wouldn't even fight him if he could. Hermes says, Then thou concealest all that Zeus would learn? Hermes is there to ask him questions. And Prometheus says, As though I owed him aught and should repay. Scornful thy word, as though I were a child. Child, I, or whatsoever hath less of brain, thou deeming thou canst wring my secret out. And what he's saying is, you're either a child or stupid, and either way, you're lesser than what I am, and I'm not telling you my secrets. No mangling torture, no, nor sleight of power there is, by which he shall compel my speech, until these shamming bonds be loosed from me. So let him fling his blazing levin bolt. Let him with white and winged flakes of snow, and rumbling earthquakes, whelm and shake the world. For naught of this shall bend me to reveal the power, or deign to hurl him from his throne. And so think about kings and so many myth cycles. Even Jesus' myth cycle, Moses' myth cycle. So many are the myth cycles where kings are like, oh, I'm going to die because a boy who's born this year is going to kill me. Kill all of the boys who were born this year and after this year. I don't care. Kill all the boys. Just kill everyone until I just don't die. And you can see that pathology existed by the time this book was written. And what the book is saying is that pathology is approved of. It's one that Zeus uses, and he's saying that because he's immortal, there's just no amount of pain that Zeus can put him through that will get him to tell Zeus who that child that's coming to kill Zeus is. So there's just no amount, because of his hatred for Zeus. Not his love for humanity, not his love for a potential future, his hatred of Zeus. He will never allow Zeus to harm or influence that child. And then Hermes says, Bethink thee if such words can mend thy lot. And Prometheus says, All have I long foreseen and all resolved. Perverse of will! Constrain thy soul to think more wisely in the grasp of doom. Truce to vain words. As wisely wouldst thou strive to warn a swelling wave. Imagine not that I before thy Lord's resolve will shrink in womanish terror and entreat, as with soft suppliance of female hands, the power I scorn unto the utterance, to loose me from the chains that bind me here, a world's division twixt that thought and me. He's saying a world's division. From the space between my front and my back is how far I am from making that choice. And of course he doesn't mean the short way, he means the long way around the planet. And otherwise, what I want to say is that paragraph, that little passage, accurately says for me how I feel about the people who tell me just get a job. I'll read it again. This is how I feel about to just get a job. To just put yourself at the mercy of a state that made you homeless and refuses to help you pay for your food. To put yourself at the mercy of their hospitals and their doctors and their bureaucrats. Truce, I say, to vain words. As wisely wouldst thou strive to warn a swelling wave. Imagine not that I ever before thy Lord's resolve will shrink in womanish terror and entreat. As with soft suppliance of female hands, the power I scorn unto the utterance, to loose me from the chains that bind me here, a world's division twixt that thought and me. Never, never. They'll have to kill me first. And the cops know it. That's why they largely just leave me alone. They don't talk to me. Because they know that is the scorn with which I speak to them. Because they know They know they did this to me because I made a domestic abuse complaint. And you know what they did? They put me in a mental hospital for a week until I recanted it. No torture. I let their torture change my tack. No torture. Not yours, not theirs. No amount of terrorism will change my approach. Hermes responds, "So I shall speak, whatever I speak, in vain. No prayer can melt or soften thy resolve. But, as a colt new harnessed champs the bit, thou strivest and art restrive to the rein. But all too feeble is the stratagem in which thou art so confident. For know that strong self-will is weak, and less than naught, and one more proud than wise. Bethink thee now, if these my words thou shouldest disregard, what storm, what might, as of a great third wave, shall dash thy doom upon thee, past escape. First shall the sire, with thunder and with flame of lightning, rend the crags of this ravine, and in the shattered mass o'erwhelm thy form, immured and mortised in a clasping rock. Thence, after age on age of durance done, back to the daylight shall thou come, and there the eagle-hound of Zeus, red ravening well, fell with greed shall tatter piecemeal all thy flesh, to shreds and ragged vestiges of form, yea, an unbidden guest, a day-long bane, that feeds and feeds, yea, he shall gorge his fill on blackened fragments from thy vitals gnawed. Look for no respite from that agony, until some other deity be found, ready to bear for thee the brunt of doom, choosing to pass into the lampless world of Hades and the murky depths of hell. Retreat, advise thee! 'Tis no feigned threat I whereof warned thee, but an o'er-true tale. The lips of Zeus know not of lying speech, but wreak in action all their words foretell. Do you understand what's going on here? Zeus is telling him to either tell him who the boy is that's going to grow up and kill Zeus, or Zeus is going to have a golden eagle come and eat his liver every day until he finds a way to die from the wound. Therefore, do thou look warily, and deem prudence a better savior than self-will. The chorus sing in, Meseems that Hermes speaketh not amiss, bidding thee leave thy wilfulness, and seek the wary walking of a counselled mind. Give heed to err through anger shames the wise. And Prometheus says, All I knew, whate'er his tongue and idle arrogance hath flung. 'Tis the world's way, the common lot. Foe tortures foe and pities not. Therefore I challenge him to dash his bolt on me, his zigzag flash of piercing, rending flame. Now be the welkin stirred amain with thunder, peal, and hurricane, and let the wild winds now displace from its firm poise and rooted base the stubborn earthly frame. The raging sea with stormy surge rise up and raven and submerge each high star-trodden way. Let me him lift and dash to gloom of neither hell and whirls of doom. Yet do he what extremes he may, he cannot crush my life away. Yeah, so basically, the quote, like, they may torture, they may destroy my body, but they can't crush my spirit. You may kill me, but you can't crush my spirit, is effectively what he's saying here. Except what he's not saying is, you can crush my spirit, but you can't kill my body. So good luck crushing my spirit, because you can't kill my body. Hermes says, Such are the counsels, such the strain, heard from wild lips and frenzied brain. And word or thought how fails his fate, of madness, wile, and desperate. To the chorus then. But ye who stand compassionate, here at his side depart in haste, lest of his penalty ye taste, and shattered brain and reason feel the roaring, ruthless thunder peal. The chorus then sing. Out on thee! If thy heart be fain, I should obey thee. Change thy strain. Vile is thine hinted cowardice, and loathed of me thy base... Oh, wait, so I'm going to say that again. Vile is thine hinted cowardice, and loathed of me thy base advice, weakly to shrink from pain. Nay, at his side, whatever befall, I will abide, endure it all. Among all things abhorred, accursed, I hold betrayers for the worst. I have a friend over there in the bushes. Hermes responds, Nay, ye are warned, remember well, nor cry when meshed in nets of hell. Ah, cruel fate, Zeus unkind, thus, by a sentence undivined, to dash us to the realms below. It is no sudden secret blow, Nay, yet achieve your proper woe. A warned and foreknowing shall ye go, through your own folly trapped and ta'en, into the net the fates ordain, the vast, illimitable paean. Then there's thunder and lightning, and Prometheus responds, Hark! For no more in empty word, but in sheer sooth the world is stirred. The massy earth doth heave and sway, and through their dark and secret way the caverned thunders boom. See how thy gleam athwart the sky the lightnings through the gloom, and whirlwinds roll the dust on high, and right and left the storm clouds leap to battle in the sky-y deep. In wildest uproar unconfined an universe of warring wind, and falling sky and heaving sea are blent and one on me, nearer and ever yet near more, flaunting its pageantry of fear, drives down in might its destined road, the tempest of the wrath of God. O holy earth, O mother mine, O sky that biddest speed along thy vault, the common light divine, be witness of my wrong. The rocks are then rent with fire and earthquake and fall, burying Prometheus in the ruins. The end. Hey, so I haven't done this at the end of a lot of these because I don't feel it, but if you just sat through that with me, thank you. That was a lot of fun. If you hit me up with that was a lot of fun, I'll know that you enjoyed it, and I'll get the reward that I get from money just from that. Hey, that was fun. Take care.